Have you ever seen a herd running toward a cliff, one after another, without stopping, without questioning, without looking to the side, without asking why the first one is running? Now imagine you are watching them. Would you try to stop them? And if you tried, from where would you do it? Would you stand in front of them? Would you stand on the left, on the right? Would you raise your hands and shout? What would happen to you? You would probably be crushed. Because a herd in panic does not stop because one voice says stop. A herd in panic follows movement, follows fear, follows the body in front, follows the impulse, follows the nervous system of the group. And that reveals something powerful. When every body follows the first one without questioning the direction, the danger is not only the cliff. The danger is the pattern. The danger is the automatic reaction. The danger is the loss of inner command. So what could stop them? Not an argument, not a lecture, not a theory, an impact. A signal strong enough to reach the emotional center of the nervous system before the body reaches the edge. A sound, a flash, a rupture in the pattern, a visual shock, something that interrupts the trance of movement. Because when a being is running inside fear, logic arrives too late. The body has already obeyed. This is what I want you to observe. What if humanity is behaving like that herd, running after the first one, eating what everyone eats, believing what everyone believes, fearing what everyone fears, repeating what everyone repeats, calling reality normal because everyone around them calls it normal? But what if the cliff is not only ahead of us? What if the cliff is inside the program, inside the reaction, inside the fear, inside the automatic obedience? Then the question becomes brutal. How do you stop a humanity that is running without looking? You do not stand in front of the stampede. You create a signal, a key, a sound, a color, a question, a visual impact, something that touches the emotional center before the programmed reaction completes itself. That is why beauty matters. That is why music matters. That is why color matters. That is why food matters. That is why water matters. That is why the body matters. Because the system does not only control ideas, it controls reactions. It controls fear. It controls appetite. It controls repetition. It controls what the nervous system accepts as normal. So the first act of freedom is not to scream at the herd. The first act of freedom is to stop inside yourself. Open your hands, breathe, observe, and ask, where am I running? Who started this movement? Why am I following? What cliff have they normalized in front of me? This is where decoding begins. Not in the sky, not in Antarctica, not in a book written to frighten the future. It begins in the reaction. Because whoever controls the reaction controls the direction, and whoever recovers the reaction begins to recover the key. But did you notice? Did you feel it? How many times have you found yourself in that same situation, trying to convince your family about the last video you watched, the last book you read, or the last piece of news you discovered that shook the ground beneath your feet? Because that is what you feel every time you see something that collapses reality. Life trembles beneath your feet. And the first reaction is to tell them, to warn them. Why? Because you feel, because you have empathy, because you want to protect them, because you love them, and because you would also want them to react the same way with you if they discovered something that could prevent you from falling off the cliff like the buffalo herd, right? How many times have you seen yourself in that exact position? But what was their reaction? Maybe it was the opposite of what you expected. Most likely it was. If you touched the sensitive nerve of their beliefs and their mental security system, then they defended themselves. They ridiculed you. They told you that you were the one who was wrong. They told you that you were the one who needed to correct your way of thinking. They are fine. You are the one who is wrong. Why? Because the collective carries the engine force of reality. Do you see it? Because it is one wave after another wave. And where the waves go, the sea goes. Where the waves move, the sea follows. But look at how the direction of the sea changes when the wind blows and strikes it. Then where do the waves go? In another direction. But still, one wave after another wave. Or have you ever seen waves fighting against themselves? One going one way and another going the opposite way? They always move in a direction, or a whirlpool forms, and then they all follow the whirlpool. Because there's always a force that determines where the movement goes. So in your family, who carries that force? The word security. Whatever gives them security becomes the final answer. But what gives security? Custom. Habit. So now we have another word: habit, custom, and security. Those are pillars holding the architecture of their thinking and the mental security of the reality in which they live. That is why the words reality and truth are opposites. Truth is what is invariable. Truth is what is. What is, without being affected in that moment. It is what remains. But reality is the portion of truth that each person adapts according to their own system of security and created habits. I can believe one thing, you can believe another. Your mother, your cousin, your uncle, and your brother can each believe something else. But there is always a point where everyone meets, a point where everything coincides. Family security. Right? That is where some people give in and others adapt just to fit together like puzzle pieces or like domino pieces in the game of dominoes. 6 with 6, 3 with 3, 5 with 5, 7 with 7, 9 with 9. Right? So what would you do from now on? What would you do? Would you go now and tell your mother, look, there were men with their heads inside their chests? Would you tell her, listen, never set foot in the Appalachian Mountains? Never go visit anyone you know there, because in that region there are Bigfoots, skinwalkers, portals, and people disappear like the green children of England. What would her reaction be? She would probably tell you to pray if your mother is a believer. Or perhaps she would say, I am going to speak with the priest, or with the pastor if she is Christian. And if she practices Santeria, she might tell you, you need a cleansing. You need to be spiritually washed. You need to be blessed. That is common in Caribbean cultures. A spiritual cleansing in that context can involve herbs, songs, prayers, alcohol around the body, and tobacco smoke, all used to remove what they perceive as a harmful influence. That is what happens in the Caribbean and in some areas of Africa. I am explaining this for people in Europe and the United States who may have never heard of what I am talking about. Why does each person react this way? Because each person defends their own belief system. So from now on, I will tell you what I have started doing. I have stopped standing in front of the buffalo herd. I have stopped trying to stop the buffalo, because the mental system of someone who lives inside a pattern of security and habit is like that herd. They will never hear me. And if they run toward me, I end up like a flat sticker on the ground, crushed. Because I stood in front of a movement that was never going to stop just because I spoke. That is why the real question is different now. How do you awaken someone without becoming the obstacle that gets destroyed? How do you interrupt a pattern without throwing yourself in front of the stampede? How do you reach the emotional center of a nervous system that is moving through habit, fear, belief, and family security? That is where the work begins. Because the goal is not to scream at the herd. The goal is to understand what moves it, what guides it, what frightens it, what gives it security, what keeps it moving toward the edge while calling that movement normal. And once you understand that, you stop wasting your life trying to convince people through shock. You begin to create signals, images, questions, music, beauty, silence, color, a key, something that touches the emotional center before the defense system rises. Because when you attack someone's reality directly, they defend the cage. But when you create a signal that enters through beauty, curiosity, and emotion, something different can happen. A small opening, a pause, a tremor, a question. And sometimes one question is stronger than 1,000 warnings.
I'm in a similar situation. Hi, I am Leah Luz. Tell me if you have been or if you are now in a similar situation with your family or your friends. You want to tell them that something inside you has changed. You want to explain that your way of thinking has changed. But they struggle to understand you, right? And suddenly you feel a wall just in front of you of astonishment. Have you felt this too? Leave me your comments below, okay? Have a very beautiful day. Bye-bye.